Thank you everybody for joining. I'm stunned with how many people are here. This is a joint session that we're doing with my tutoring company, which is called Barak Tutoring, together with Road to College. Thank you everybody for joining. We're going to be talking about the digital SAT. And if you have students here, that's terrific. But this is going to be oriented towards parents and towards students. And the idea is, when we start in a minute, we're going to let you know how you can fully take advantage of this change. And it is a huge opportunity to really make a very big difference in your college admission. All right, so I think we're saying start now. Terrific. All right, thank you everybody for joining. My name is Barak, and my assistant Jen is with me on the line as well, and she will be speaking up and correcting me whenever I say something that isn't correct. All right, but the idea of today is very simple. There is a huge change on the horizon. The SAT does not change very often. Every 100 years or so, they go and they adopt a new technology like the internet, like the computer. All right, I'm going to explain the technical aspects of what that means, but much more important, I'm going to explain what it is that that you need to do differently, your child needs to do differently in order to really take advantage of this tremendous opportunity. In general, it is a wonderful change, okay? But we'll give you the details, and if any students are on the line, as I always do, I'm going to raise your scores during this session, and hopefully I'll raise your score significantly. Hi from Luxembourg. Thanks for joining in there. By the way, if anybody has any questions or comments or feedback, just put it in the chat. Jen is going to be monitoring that. All right.
There will also be a recording that will be probably sent out tomorrow.
All right, terrific. So I am going to share my screen, okay? And we're basically just going to be talking about what are the changes to the test, how that can change what you should be doing now in order to prepare for that. The test is rolling out over the course of the next year in stages. In certain places, it's already a reality. Anywhere overseas, they're taking the digital SAT right now. PSAT is right now going to be live. It's going to start in the fall, but there will never be another national merit test that's based on paper. And there will also be options to take it during this year when it's going to be transitioning over in stages. So it's getting very, very close. All right, I'm going to raise your scores, as I mentioned, giving some techniques. The SAT, like the ACT, is a consistent test. It's a reliable test, and it's an utterly predictable test. So even though there's a whole new change, there are incredibly shocking predictable elements to the test, and I will show those to you. And at the end, I'll be happy to take any questions that anybody has. Terrific. So the basics are, what's the timeline for the rollout? Okay. And the basics are that the international SAT, as I mentioned, is going to be rolling out within the next couple of weeks, okay? And in the fall, you'll see the PSAT will be digital, and then in the spring, you will get the requirement. This is the timeline, the requirement for everybody to take the test digitally. This year, there will be very kind volunteers who will be volunteering to be taking the test digitally. Anybody who wants to take the test now digitally can pretty much find an opportunity to do so, and I think it's pretty much free. They're testing this on hundreds of thousands of people, probably maybe tens of thousands, but a huge number of people. They're testing it to make sure that it's rock solid, consistent, that it provides the same type of scores that you would get if you're taking it in a paper form. However, it's a significantly shorter test, over an hour shorter in length, and also more reliable because they're using computer technology to figure out exactly where you are. Okay, so some of the basics. There's going to be an app that you download to your computer. This is a test which assumes you have a computer and you've prepared ahead of time. You've loaded this Blue Book app up. If you don't have a computer, if you don't have access to a computer, they will provide one for you. You still have to take the test at a testing facility, and there's a lot of technical information at collegeboard.com, but much of it is trivial, including information on trivial new functionality of the test, some of which you should avoid. Just because there's new functions doesn't mean you should use it. For example, there's a highlighter function where you can go and waste time going and putting in yellow a highlight on a very short question. That's a waste of time. Don't do that. Okay, there's other new functions that you should just avoid. Okay, a huge change that everybody will notice is there's no more separation between reading and language, okay, which they call writing. Now it's one verbal section, okay, and there has been an enormous change there. Essentially, traditional reading comprehension has gone away. There is no more testing of find the main idea of what is your retention of the material in this long passage that you've read. That's because on a computer screen, you can't have a very, very long passage that you can easily get back and forth with on paper. So what they've done is they've essentially eliminated what we think of as reading comprehension. Now, I see very sad looks on the students who are with us, but don't worry, there's an additional challenge. I know you all love challenges, and that new challenge is, since we can't have quantity, the challenge is going to be quality. Okay, and the quality is the words, the sentences that you are going to see. There's not going to be many of them, but they are going to be enormously difficult. And the key to all of that is going to be mastering vocabulary. They're going to be giving new types of reading passages, okay? And some that includes sonnets, poems, okay? Things you've never seen before. However, don't go and start reading Norton's Anthology of English Literature and mastering poetry. It's really just mastering one thing, and that's advanced vocabulary. And if you set an aim right now to start increasing your vocabulary, this thing is going to be a breeze when you see it. Okay, calculators are now permitted throughout the test. It doesn't necessarily mean you should always use a calculator. In fact, as I'm going to show you, calculator is an ideal tool for the SAT to get you to be misdirected towards focusing on the wrong thing and therefore missing the big picture of a question. Okay, you should really only use the calculator. We'll talk about this later, when you need to or where it's appropriate. The default should be avoid the calculator where possible. Now, because it's an electronic test, okay? It's a computer-based. The score reporting is going to be much quicker, okay? It's going to be adaptive, which means less frustration, okay? If we know that you can handle super hard questions, what's the point of asking 300 really easy questions? There's no point to it, okay? Many people dislike the test because it, in very primitive fashion, it just keeps you asking you easy question, easy question, easy question, easy question, even though you've demonstrated you're close to a perfect score. There's no point to doing that. So there's on each test and each area, okay, each section, meaning verbal versus math, there's going to be 3 sections, and I'll talk more about this later, and you'll get 2 of them. You'll get a medium one to start and either a harder one or an easier one to follow. Okay, that's the extent of the adaptiveness. For people who are familiar with more sophisticated adaptive tests like the GRE or other kinds of tests, this is not very adaptive. It's not going to be giving you a customized question for your level. It's just going to give you a slightly easier or harder section, one choice of an easier or harder module when you finish with the first one. And there's going to be no more mistakes by proctors who just get the time wrong. The timing is going to be perfect now, and there's going to be a lot of improvements to it. Okay, so as I said, you're going to get a medium level difficulty question module first, let's say for math. Okay, and then you'll so if you hit a certain threshold of questions right, you'll get the hard module as your second module, as the follow-up module. And if you miss that threshold, you'll get an easier one. Now, many people have asked, well, does this mean that people who do poorly earlier might have a chance of getting a much higher score later? Because, you know, just like a pilot who takes off late, he can make up the time in the air. Well, that's not going to happen, because the second module, the score that you can get is going to be capped. Okay, so if you do poorly on the first module, then you'll get an easier one on the second one. And if you should get everything right, it appears that it's approximately capped at about 650 would be the maximum score you can get on that section. Likewise, if you do really well on the first section, and then you should miraculously get every single question wrong on the follow-up hard module, the lowest you could possibly get looks like about 460, but I've never met anybody who has so much talent that they can get every single question wrong. Just by the luck of probability, you'll get 1 out of 4 right, so you'll get significantly higher than 460. But I'm just trying to give sort of a sense of what we're talking about here. Okay.
There's a question in the chat about the fact that the verbal is now no longer separated between reading and writing. It'll be covering verbal and verbal, if you want to go into that.
Exactly. All right. And I want to sort of hold off on questions so I can get through some of the basic stuff. Okay. So it's generally a positive change. Frustration is going to be lower. Accuracy is going to be higher. Time is going to be much, much shorter. Okay. People's time is worth something. All right. It's really annoying to take a 3.5-hour test. Okay. So that is going to improve. Many things are going to improve with that. Doesn't mean everything will improve initially, but in general, this should be a very positive change. All right. In terms of the details of how the adaptive nature works, students shouldn't get involved in that so much. The bottom line is just try your best on every single question, and then that's going to result in the highest score for you. Ironically, okay, if the test feels really hard, it's likely that means you're doing really well. Okay, if it feels really easy, then you may not be doing so well. So that's one thing to pay attention to. All right. So in terms of content, we don't know 100% what the content is going to be. The College Board has released 4 sample tests, okay, that we've learned everything we can from those 4 sample tests. This is hundreds of questions that are represented by those 4 tests. But if experience is a guide, we won't know until a few months after the test is rolled out what's really, really being tested. All right. Now, even though the math seems very similar, except you can use the calculator throughout, don't fall into that trap of using the calculator just because you have it in front of you. Often that's going to get you a worse outcome. All right. Mental math is still extremely important because it allows you to keep a broad focus, see the big picture, and not get trapped by little tricks and things. All right. Terrific. So the SAT, the biggest question that we get is, I have a great student. Why is he doing poorly on the SAT? Well, it's designed that way. Okay. The test aims to rank everybody in the country, essentially, and to say, here's the best student in the country. Somebody who gets a 1600 is incredibly rare. Okay, even a 1590 is enormously rare. Okay, so essentially we're rank ordering, what the College Board, let's say, is rank ordering every single student, which means they have to find a way to make a meaningful distinction between the worst student in the school and the second worst student in the school, or the best student in the school and the second best student in the school. And the way they do that is they design every single question to trip up a certain percentage of people. The easy questions, almost nobody gets tripped up. The medium questions, it's about 50-50, and the hard questions, about 80 to 85% of people get them wrong. Okay, so that's why your student might be a great student in school and they're still not doing very well on the SAT because they know what you're learning in school. It's a curriculum which is published, and the SAT knows, okay, you're not learning these things. And the bottom line from this session, if anybody's got to go, okay, the bottom line is go the extra mile, do the things that nobody is willing to do, and you're going to succeed wildly. What are the things that nobody is willing to do? Okay, the things nobody is willing to do is to sit down and learn the rules of English grammar. It can be learned in about 20 to 30 minutes. Literally, what students can't learn for years in school, they can do in 20 to 30 minutes of serious investment with energy and inspiration. It's a half hour, maybe an hour. A student could get a near perfect score in the writing and the language part, the grammar and punctuation part of the verbal. Okay. Second thing almost nobody is willing to do is to learn vocabulary. Make a standard. Every time I see a word I don't know, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to look it up, or I'm going to ask my parents. Most parents know these words. Okay. These are words that stump 17-year-olds, but words that we use all the time, like facetious and ironically. Okay. That's a tough word for a 17 or a 16-year-old, but you know them. And invite your child to just make a list of all the words they don't know and ask you. It'll be very, very efficient. That's thing number 2 that almost no 16 or 17-year-old is willing to do. Thing number 3 is to review all of the math that you've learned before in school on a regular basis. Okay. And when I say to do these things, I'm talking about 5 minutes a day. Okay. 5 minutes a day for reviewing all your old math, 5 minutes a day for learning vocabulary. Okay. And you basically have a terrific, you're going to do so much better than you would have otherwise. Those are the 3 things. All right. Let's take a look. So definitely focusing on vocabulary is very, very key. So about 35% of the questions on the verbal section now are purely vocabulary. Okay, so here, do you see that this is just what's the right word, what goes in here? That's pure vocabulary. All right, here's, but it turns out that nearly every other verbal question hinges on one's knowledge of advanced vocabulary. Okay, so for example, question number 7, do you see how this is really all about 4 very, very difficult questions? Do you know what 4 very, very difficult vocabulary words? Do you know what frankness means? Do you know what sentiment means? Do you know what it means to exalt and what preoccupied means? Okay, do you see how dense those are in this very short space? Okay, and in fact, in this particular question, if we look at it, so it says that she, her comments were marked by frankness that was no less than startling. Okay, so she had a bit of Tourette's syndrome, Mrs. Ochiltree. All right, and in fact, the last line is totally bewildering to most teenagers because as Mrs. Ochiltree was aware of this sentiment on the part of her acquaintances, that they were very standoffish when it came to her. They were worried what she was going to say, what's she going to say? All right, is she going to embarrass me? And rather exulted in it. So her friends didn't really want to be around her very much, and she loved that. Okay, so that's a very surprising twist at the end of this particular passage. I don't want to go into it too deeply, but you get the point. Here's a sonnet from Shakespeare, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't studied sonnets. I haven't, in my school, they don't teach us poetry. Well, it turns out there's very little allusion or imagery or artistry that's necessary here. It's just really a matter of, do you know these 6 words? Okay, so here, do you know the word repose, expired, abide, and a zealous pilgrimage? Most, and fatigue, that's 7. Okay, most young people don't. Okay, so get ahead of the curve, start building your vocabulary now. This test is rolling out over the next year. If you learn 5 words a day with a very sophisticated tool, and I'll tell you about that sophisticated tool. It's not like the old days. One word a day sites do not work at all educationally. Okay, flashcards, paper-based flashcards rarely work. And these books, okay, learn 500 words from a book. That doesn't work, but there are very, very sophisticated tools. They've invented tremendous things for learning vocabulary and mastering it very quickly with a 100% lifetime retention rate. And I'll talk about that in a minute. All right, and here the minute has just arrived. Okay, this is the application that I recommend. It's free on most platforms. There's one platform where it's not fully free. That's on the iPhone, but it is free on the Mac, on Windows machines, on Android, on Linux, if you have that. All right, and even on the iPhone, you can get it for free by just using a browser like Safari. Okay, Anki is it's because it's free, it didn't do so well in terms of copywriting. There's tons of knockoffs. Make sure you see this icon, and we're going to be sending out an information sheet afterwards, which has got reference to all of these things. But if you master these 1,500 words, you could either do it in a month and a half by cramming, or you could do it over a period of a year or two just by learning it 5 or 10 minutes per day. This will put you in wonderful stead for the SAT, and it will make your college experience so much easier. All right, you're going to be when you get beyond the SAT, you're going to be going to this place called college. And when you go to college, you're going to be confronted by Spinoza and Hume and writers that Kant is very, very difficult. Okay, but if you have great vocabulary, that's going to make things so much easier. All right, we also recommend get involved with reading, not so you can learn to read long passages, but just so you can have a familiarity with the grammar and language that we speak, and also so that you can have the opportunity to see high-level words that you will then look up. My assistant Jen made this thing. It's wonderful. Sign up for it. You'll love it. Okay, and there's a QR code if you want, and we're going to have links to this one after. All right, so what does this mean? What do you need to do differently? So for math, go ahead and still learn mental math. Okay, there is this idea, well, you have a calculator, so you don't need to know what 6 times 6 is. This is a myth, and this is handicapping our children. Do not fall for that. All right, pick as early as possible as you can in your high school career, one calculator. Do not be a jack of all calculators. Okay, you can choose the built-in calculator. It's a very sophisticated calculator. It's called Desmos and has one major flaw, which I'll tell you about in a second, but it's a perfectly good calculator in terms of pure functionality. Or if you've got, if you've mastered the TI-84, all right, or something like that, stick with it, make it a standard. I'm going to learn every single function of this calculator and this calculator only. What's the issue with Desmos on the built-in calculator? And that is that you have, if you're going to do that, you have a major advantage if you have a big screen. Okay, meaning if you have a 17-inch screen, if you have access to a 17-inch screen, if you can borrow one, do that. Ideally a touch screen, but more important to get a big one if you're going to use the built-in calculator. Okay, if you don't have a built-in calculator, you're going to be opening and closing and opening and closing and opening and closing the calculator, and that is going to drive you crazy, just like the Baby Shark song. So don't do that if you can avoid it. Okay, if you can't get a 17-inch calculator, a 17-inch screen or a big screen for your laptop to take the test on, bring in your own calculator. You avoid all the problem, assuming that you know how to use that calculator. There are some schools where they use Desmos a lot. All right, the key is it doesn't matter what the functionality of the calculator is. It matters what the functionality of the person driving the calculator is. So master a calculator. Okay, and the last thing you need to do differently on math is you need to spend 5 minutes a day. Every single day you brush your teeth for 5 minutes a day. You are going to spend 5 minutes a day reviewing all of the math that you learned. And there's a perfect tool for it. It's free. It's called Khan Academy. I'm very impressed with Khan Academy's school math curriculum. Not so impressed with the SAT Khan Academy. It's a little bit of a PR move, and they didn't spend a lot of time doing it. But there are terrific alternatives to SAT prep, but Khan Academy for master, for reviewing Algebra 1, for reviewing 6th grade math. There's 4th grade math on the SAT. How do you divide fractions? I bet your teenager has no idea how to divide 2/3 divided by 1/2. Okay, every 4th to 6th grader knows that, but teenagers do not. So make sure they stay on top of this. Do not let summer be a reboot for the math brain. Okay, all right. They should be still during the summer spending 5 minutes. It's just 5 minutes, and they will have a wonderful, wonderful grasp of holistic math. Okay, and then the test will literally become fun. All right, we talked about calculators. All right, and here's an example of a question where if you use a calculator, you will be at a significant disadvantage. Okay, so here, I'm not going to go into this question too deeply. I'm just going to point out that, do you see the answers, how far apart they are? That means that precision is not necessary. A calculator supplies precision. This kind of a question, you don't need any precision at all. You just need to get the general picture. Okay, just like horseshoes and hand grenades, you don't need to get accurate and close. Okay, you just need to notice that if we're talking about a square field that's 10 by 10, and we're going for 1 meter square things, you've got 100 of them. And here they list 10 of them. Okay, most people, if you're holding a calculator, you start seeing this, you're going to start wanting to add these up. You're going to start wanting to get the average. Okay, and if you add them up, you'll get about 1,500, but that's only 10% of the data, which we said was 10 by 10, which is 100. So we have to take that 1,500, which almost everybody gets, and make it 15,000. Okay, and that's why a calculator is a dangerous thing. There are very good uses of a calculator, but the default should be don't use a calculator, because you need to keep your wits about you, because every question is trying to trick you to a certain extent. And if you get sucked into the technical aspect, the rhythm of using a calculator, you're going to be at a disadvantage here. And I don't want you to be at a disadvantage. All right, let's take a look now at, so what else should I do? Okay, so in terms of preparing for this, it's a little bit convoluted how you should prepare, because there's really only 4 practice tests, okay, and that's it. Okay, so there are certain aspects of the paper-based test which are still valid. Okay, basically sections 2 to 4, you'll find the most questions that will still be valid. Obviously, section 1, which is the reading section, is no longer relevant. Okay, but there are also SATs from before 2016, which you can find on the internet, that have new types of questions that are very much like the new digital SAT questions. So those are helpful. And you can even go to the GRE to get certain kinds of questions that are considered new, but they're actually quite old and they've been on the GRE for years. And a tutor really can help, a test prep professional can help put those together in terms of prep materials. All right. And one other thing which I didn't mention, but this is so important, somebody who reads every day for pleasure and is constantly pushing himself to go higher and higher level of difficulty is going to do very, very well with the language aspects and the vocabulary and the grammar, the punctuation, and the comprehension, even in the shorter things. So that's a very, very important thing to do. Okay. Now, just before the test is the time to really master the Blue Book app. Not now, okay? Assuming you're taking it in a year or so. Just a couple of months beforehand, download it, make sure it's working on your computer, and start learning about the functionality, okay? Given that there's only 4 digital SAT practice tests, save them when you can do it right, when you can take them timed, okay? All right, so what should you do differently? Okay, so here, these are some habits that you should develop. Okay, somebody who wants to score high should proactively learn vocabulary. Almost nobody is doing this. Should read voraciously for pleasure, which means last thing I do before I go to bed is I should be reading. First thing I do when I wake up, even if it's just a few paragraphs, I should be reading. That's what it means to be a reader, okay? Not 9 hours a day on the smartphone, which is what surveys say the average young person is spending on their smartphone being entertained. Every time you see an unfamiliar word, a high score is going to look it up, okay? And you're continuously pushing yourself to a higher level, okay? Also, as I said, you're going to be regularly reviewing all math, and I'm just talking about 5 minutes a day. Don't let things go. Think about the why of math. If you're taught absolute value, think about what could that be useful for? And I'm talking about 2-3 seconds, but it makes all the difference. You're going to enjoy mental math if you want to be a high scorer, and you're going to decide, this is my calculator. My standard is I'm going to learn every function. Okay, and that's going to be very helpful for college as well. If you love mastery, then this is going to be a wonderful experience for you. Okay, forget about the adaptive testing discussions. Just try to do the best you can on each question. Do not rely on the annotation tool on the digital SAT when it's time to take the test. Just use scrap paper. You can do so much more quickly on that. All right, start now. This may seem a bit overwhelming, all the different things you need to master, okay? But if you start now and you get into gear, you are going to be ahead of 99% of other students. Almost everybody waits till the last minute. People don't get ahead of the curve, and then they discover, I need to master all this hard vocabulary, which is very, very difficult to do at the last minute. Okay, so here are 3 things that will raise your score. Okay, there are patterns. This is a standardized test, which means it's a predictable test. And I'm going to show you some things that are hopefully going to shock you a bit. Okay, so here, do you see that this this reading passage, not that long, but it's a little bit intimidating. You can do much better if you forget all the context and just focus on one sentence at a time. All right, so do you see here? Today, Pak something considered the first video artist. So you see, is it today Pak will be the first video artist? And maybe I should be reading it as today. So clearly it's not will be. Clearly today is not had been. Clearly today is not was. Today is just is. Today Pak is considered. All right. And do you see how much easier that is than if you learn about 1963 exposition of music, Korean American artist Nam Jun Pak, all of that will lower your score if you focus on that. I'll show you another example. Okay. Here we've got $200,000, 1637, tulips skyrocketing, and all we need to do is ignore all that. Focus on one sentence where the answer choice is, and it becomes so much easier. Some historians claiming that this tulip mania was the first historical instance of whatever, or some historians claim that whatever happened. Okay, so obviously it's some historians claim, and you can just, any native speaker of English can pretty much hear that with their ear. And the secret to this question, as I said, is just cut back everything they give you to just one sentence. Last one I'll show you on this type is, this is overwhelming because the title gives the year, Zakia Dalila Harris. Okay, do we need that long name? No, we don't. We don't need any of this. All we just do is, the award-winning book is Harris's first novel, but her writing something honored before, but her writing have been honored before. That just breaks your ears to hear that. But her writing has been honored before. Her writing are honored before. So it's really just getting to focus in on just the sentence in front of you. Ignore the rest. And Jen came up with a number of examples from the thing. This one is so much easier to do if we just focus on that. This one is just so much easier to do if we focus on this sentence. It's just one after another after another. Okay. Let me show you another pattern that you'll see on the test. So it turns out that on the digital SAT, almost invariably, a semicolon is exactly the same as a period. Okay, so do you notice here that there are 2 answer choices? They're exactly the same. Added semicolon whenever, added period whenever. If a semicolon is the same thing as a period, this way we can get rid of half of the answer choices. We can get rid of B and C immediately. Same thing with this one right here. So semicolon positing, if semicolon is exactly the same as period, then so period positing would be exactly the same thing. So C and D would be absolutely the same. Same thing here with C and D. All right. And the last one I will show you, this is from a single test, single digital SAT. All right. Any student in school will be able to look at this and say, is it going up or is it going down? Okay. So up is going, so down are these two red negatives that I circled. Okay. Obviously, it's going up and not down. Okay. So we can eliminate half of the answers instantly without looking at the question, meaning B and D we can get rid of. And then, is it above or below the line? Clearly, it's above. So anybody who's taken 8th grade math knows that we're talking about 2.8 and not negative 2.8. So we can eliminate the two reds and the two blues. All right. And I'm not going to go into these other questions, but I'll just show you. And we can eliminate the two reds and the two blues from question 11. And from question 89A, we can eliminate the two reds and the two blues from 89A. And from question number 11, we can eliminate the two reds and the two blues. All right. Jen, you took all these questions from a single test, right? All right. She took them from a single test. Okay. Did I mention that this is a predictable test? Okay. They're testing their psychometric psychometricians have rules, and they have tests that they run called things like biserial correlation. And what it all boils down to is that the questions are very, very predictable, as I just showed you. So here, if you master these 3 techniques, your score will go up. Oh, and here's another one Jen found. You can eliminate the two reds and the two blues. Very, very easy. And anybody who has got a high schooler sitting next to them is probably has that high schooler laughing right now because this is ridiculous. Okay. Frequently asked questions I put up here. If anybody would like to ask a question, please just put it in the chat. And Jen, would you?
I have so many questions that I've been collecting for you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, so people were asking about accommodations, and if people can't take the digital test for accommodations reasons, what happens if they are allowed extra time? Where do they find that information? And do you know anything about what the next piece of that is?
Sure. So in terms of accommodations, I probably will direct you over here. And that is, there still is a paper-based digital SAT. It's not adaptive, okay? But for anybody who's got accommodations, they can take a paper version of the digital test. So that's that is one answer. However, if you have accommodations for the test, okay, so an accommodation doesn't help you that much with the SAT in terms of extra time. That's what they give you in terms of most people, they give the accommodation is just extra time. So it doesn't help you so much on the SAT because the SAT is not time is not a challenge for many, many students. On the ACT, the time is a challenge for almost everybody. Okay, so if you get extra time accommodation, you should probably be taking the ACT. Getting extra time accommodation on the ACT is a huge advantage. Okay, so that would be a really strong reason to take the ACT. I've got some criteria that Jen and I have put together on what factors might influence you to take either the SAT, the digital SAT, or the ACT. You've got 3 choices now, and it's not so clear exactly what you should take. Okay, Jen, other questions? Oh, Jen, I don't read lips anymore, so can you come off of mute?
Sorry. Can you go back to the previous slide? Somebody wanted to screenshot the one of the strengths as well. And if anybody has any questions or they need a piece of this, this will be sent out as a recording in your email tomorrow afternoon. So you will get this recording tomorrow. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to see this, watch it at your leisure. Okay, so people want to know what test they should take. If you're studying for the PSAT, should you take the digital, that piece of it as well?
Okay, terrific. Thank you for the question. All right. So if you are studying for the PSAT, there's 2 kinds of PSAT. One is PSAT that gets you practice, and the other is PSAT that gets you money. Okay, if you think the PSAT might get you money, and I'm talking about either being a national merit semifinalist, or there's a much lower threshold, okay, for certain categories of people. Okay, you can get a far lower number now and get a full ride from a number of schools, okay, including anybody who's got a student in a younger grade can arrange that they are in a rural school, okay, like a small town rural school. If you can arrange that when you're a junior, your ship might just have come in and you might get college completely for free. So take a look at that. But if you are in range, or there's a possibility of getting money for college, meaning a full ride, or a very close to a full ride, or a lot of merit through national merit, then you should be focusing all of your efforts on the PSAT. Okay, PSAT is digital. So if you're focusing all of your efforts on the PSAT, then you might as well just follow up with taking the digital SAT after you take the PSAT. All right. If you're taking the PSAT for practice, however, okay, you've still got the option of taking the ACT, the SAT, or the digital SAT. And Jen, one thing that I should mention before we take any more questions is that if anyone is interested in finding out any more information about anything that we've discussed here in terms of private tutoring or in terms of group classes, or if anybody is interested, Jen, should we give away that 20-30-minute guide to getting your grammar score to be perfect?
A lot of people have asked. If you would like, Barak made a fantastic 18-minute video going over the rules of grammar. It's fantastic. Send us an email, which is on the screen, and we can send that out. I think it's worth it. A lot of people were asking in the chat.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, I don't mind providing that. Just put your just send in a message to us. I think at barakmoore@gmail.com. Is that what they should do, or should they put it in the chat?
If you send us an email, we'll for sure get back to you sooner than if you put it in the chat, because there's almost 300 people on this call. So if I have to scroll through, it might take a while.
Okay, so
People were wondering.
Just
Yeah.
1 second. So put your email. So please send us an email, and just maybe put in the subject what you're looking for, which would probably just be the grammar punctuation video. It uses no jargon whatsoever, and anybody can master it. Also, if you're interested in finding out, I give private tutoring, and I also do group classes. And if you're interested in finding out more information about that, you can send us an email as well. Okay, Jen, what did you have?
People were wondering whether or not there's going to be super scoring between tests and how that works.
Yes, so super scoring is not technically a function of the SAT. The College Board enables super scoring. The ACT enables super scoring. And it seems like just about every college in the United States it takes advantage of super scoring. That's not a College Board thing. The College Board enables it, but then the specific colleges will take advantage of that. One of the key, so it seems from all indications that colleges will still allow super scoring. Okay, but the question is just, will they super score between a paper and a digital? My money is on absolutely. There's no distinction between those two things. So why not?
What's the difference between studying for the PSAT and the SAT?
Almost nothing. The tests are nearly identical. So preparing for one test is going to prepare you for the other. Okay. And when I say PSAT, I'm referring to the PSAT, which is the one that juniors take in terms of national merit. There are other flavors of the PSAT, the PSAT 8, 9, so there's earlier ones that are designed for practice for younger grades. Okay, those are slightly easier, but the tests are nearly identical. Every question type that you would see on one, you'll see on the other.
What math does the SAT cover?
Awesome question. So I would call the SAT math test, I would call that the SAT Algebra 1 test. because the majority of the material covered is Algebra 1. 56% of the test is Algebra 1. So, and this is where schools are ludicrously out of sync with the SAT. Okay, most schools will teach Algebra 1 in 8th and 9th, or 8th and 9th grade, and then you'll have the summer, you'll take geometry, and then you'll come back and you'll take the PSAT or the SAT, having forgotten all of the Algebra 1 you just took for the most important test, probably of your life. Okay, so it makes very, very little sense, and it's just another piece of evidence that the College Board knows what you know, knows what you're learning in school, and takes advantage of that in terms of getting questions wrong. Okay, so make sure to stay on top of Algebra 1, because that's the majority of the test.
Yeah. What calculator do you recommend?
I recommend the calculator that you have, that you like to use, and that you're already familiar with. Okay. Same thing with fighter jets. Okay. If you're going up in the sky to have a dogfight with the fighter jet that you know. Hasn't anybody seen Top Gun? Okay. You don't want to go with the fancy high functionality fighter jet that you don't know how to use. Okay. So most schools will encourage all of their students to use the TI-84 SE Plus. So if you know that already, go with that. A lot of schools are encouraging their students to use Desmos. It's very, very wonderful computer. So if you, a calculator, so if you are in the, if that's where you're headed, go with that. Okay. Although there are some people who love the Casio, it's an easier calculator to use in general.
Next year's juniors, should they take the paper-based test and the digital PSAT? Should they wait and take the digital PSAT and then the digital SAT in March? What do you recommend? There's like a lot of people asking that question.
So there is this idea, let's get in under the wire. Let's just take the paper-based test. And if there's good thinking behind that, okay, and then we will just be finished with before the deal comes around. Okay, there's what makes a lot of sense with that is there is a tremendous amount of prep materials already there. Okay, this is a 1 in the hand, 2 in the bush kind of a situation. All right, and we have so much material in hand. We know exactly what's going to be on the SAT. We have many real tests that are available also for the ACT. So there's a tremendous amount of material available there. And there's a paucity of material available for the digital SAT. Speaking of hard vocabulary words. Okay, so that would be a good reason to take either the paper-based SAT or the ACT. Okay, but there's just one little flaw in that logic, and that is that a young person's mind develops very, very quickly. And it's a self-reinforcing cycle if they do it right. The more the vocabulary develops, the more their reading ability develops, the more their language ability develops, the more they read at a higher level, they encounter higher level things, more challenging texts, and the more that they get better faster. So it really is the case that in general, it's a good idea to delay testing as long as possible because of the maturity that just accrues with being in school and learning and being active, being alive, being around adults, being connected to the language and the world.
What about test optional? Like, is all of this even relevant?
So test optional is a very, very interesting development where test optional has made college admissions, in my opinion, much more competitive. Okay, because with test optional, what that has done is there's 2 kinds of applicants to colleges. And those of you who've been on Paying for College 101, as assume most of you are, and those of you who aren't, you should join Paying for College 101. It's a fantastic site where you will learn so much from there. You'll get a PhD in the college admissions process. But those of you who are there are well aware that there are these students who are hooked and students who are not hooked. For example, Harvard says, oh, we're need blind. We don't look at anybody's financial situation, but you're 9 times more likely to get into Harvard if you are a major donor. Okay, so I'm not sure that those two things square. Okay, if you have your name on a building, then test optional is an excellent choice for you. If you are an All-American football player, test optional is a great option for you. But if you look at paying for college 101 and very occasionally somebody will write, should I go test optional? And you will see 342 mothers write in, definitely not, definitely not. You get money from having a higher test score. You get higher chances of admission from having a higher test score. There's schools like Notre Dame, which have an above 100% ACT plus SAT in terms of their admitted applicants. So if you want to apply to college test optional, that's great. If you want to get in, you probably want to submit test scores. Even for the most famous test blind school in the country, meaning they don't accept test scores, and that's the UC system, they still use SATs and ACTs in terms of as a placement for writing classes. Okay, and if you want, you can take you can pay money for expensive college course to do exactly the same thing in terms of getting placed, in terms of getting qualified for certain courses at UC, or you could take the test. So there's so many uses for it. It's very useful in college, in athletic admissions. It's useful in terms of certifications for nursing and other disciplines. So there's tremendous number of doors that the test opens. One can always not submit, but it's still a wonderful thing. And the other thing, which isn't thought of all that much, is that the test makes you a better college-ready student. Okay, it is. If there was no test, no teenager in the history of life would ever sit down and say, let me master the rules of English grammar. They would never do that. And it is so helpful for going to college. Reviewing all of your math, having a wonderful holistic math competency is just a great thing. Okay, it's like having a marathon to run. You're going to become a terrific runner if you know that in 6 weeks I have to run a marathon. It's an entirely different thing than, yeah, like running, it's a good thing. But if you have a marathon scheduled, you're going to be a totally different type of runner.
So we wanted to make sure that this wasn't like all about your tutoring and that kind of thing, but there were questions about how to know what test questions are going to help prepare for the digital SAT, and how to find a tutor that teaches those.
Sure. So the first thing is, thank you for the question. So you need to find a tutor who does this professionally full-time, and that is extremely rare. Okay, there are a very small handful of tutors who do this full-time. Okay, it is not something that you can do part-time. It is a serious profession. The distinctions between questions, how do you get somebody from this level of skill to a much higher level of skill very, very quickly is a tough thing to do. So I'd recommend get somebody who is a professional. We often, as we get close to the test, we get very, very booked up. So if you ever send us a message, look, it's close to the test, I need a tutor, Jen will help you. She'll give you recommendations on who to go to if we can't help you. But we also have group classes, and we also have I also give private tutoring. One thing that I've done that nobody else in the world has done is to create a database of every question that's ever been asked, which enables me to do sophisticated analytics and know all of these patterns. These things that I told you today in terms of some very predictable patterns on the test, literally nobody knows in the business. So I think that's an advantage of going with somebody who's done that. I've personally been in the business for over 30 years. If you could believe it, I'm the first student of the Princeton Review. The founder of the Princeton Review was my private tutor when I was 13 years old. He helped me get into Princeton University when I was 15. I started teaching for the Princeton Review classes when I was 16, and I ended up running his company, and I've been in this business for over 30 years. I have the greatest job in the world. I get to make people awesome fast. Students are hungry, they're ambitious, they want to change their lives. It's the most wonderful thing to be part of. And I am utterly and completely grateful to everybody for giving me this wonderful profession. I have the greatest job in the world, and it's all because of you.
So tomorrow you should get an email that has the recording of this. And if people want to reach out to us about tutoring or about that grammar video, just send us an email and I'll try to get through as many as I possibly can.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much to Paying for College 101, Road to College, the terrific sites, and you'll learn a tremendous amount there. So I wanted to thank them. And if anybody has any questions that they remember as soon as they hang up, okay, just go to Paying for College 101, type there, Barak, you didn't answer my question. I need an answer right now. And you'll get, we'll be happy to respond, and you'll get 300 other people to respond as well. All right. It was terrific. Thank you so much for joining. And I look forward to seeing you around on Paying for College 101, or if you work with me in the future, that would be terrific. And I can't wait to see you all in the future.